My relatives turned their backs on me during my son's critical operation, and 4 days later, my mother returned with a shocking confession that changed everything. I still remember the cold fluorescent lights of the hospital hallway, the way they buzzed softly while my world fell apart. My 8-year-old son, Liam, had been rushed in for an emergency surgery after a sudden, life-threatening complication. I called my family immediately, my mother, my sister, and my 2 brothers, hoping they would stand by me during the hardest moment of my life. But one by one, they made excuses. Mom said she was too tired after a long shift. My sister claimed she had plans she couldn't cancel. My brothers sent brief texts wishing good luck, as if this were some school exam and not my child lying unconscious on an operating table. Hours stretched endlessly. I sat alone, shaking, praying, bargaining with every higher power I could think of. I wanted someone, anyone, to sit beside me. But all I had was a silent corridor and the echo of my own fears. Liam survived the surgery, but the recovery was risky. For 4 days, I stayed by his bedside, barely sleeping, feeding him ice chips, speaking softly so he'd know I was there even when he drifted in and out of consciousness. Still, my phone remained painfully silent. On the 4th day, just as dawn began to wash the sky pale blue, my mother walked into the room. Her face was swollen, not from sleep but from crying. She didn't look tired, she looked broken. Before I could speak, she knelt beside me and took my hands. "I need to tell you something," she whispered. "Something I've kept from you for years." My heart tightened. "Mom, what are you talking about?" She looked at Liam, then at me. "When you were Liam's age, you were in the hospital too. And I didn't stay with you." Tears streamed down her face. "I abandoned you because I was overwhelmed and scared, and I've tried to pretend it never happened. When you called me about Liam, that fear came back, and I froze. I didn't come because I was ashamed." Her confession hit me harder than anything I expected. A memory stirred: white walls, a nurse's gentle voice, the emptiness of waiting for someone who never arrived. I had buried that experience so deeply I didn't even recognize it until now. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I should have been here. For him. For you." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to pull away, to remind her of the pain her absence caused me then, and now. But another part saw the trembling in her hands, the genuine remorse in her eyes. She stayed the rest of that day. She held Liam's hand, sang softly to him, and refused to leave his bedside even when her legs shook from standing too long. Over the following weeks, my family trickled back with flimsy apologies. But things were different. I no longer felt dependent on their presence or approval. I had learned, painfully, that sometimes the people you expect to stand beside you simply can't. Yet my mother, she tried. And though her confession broke something inside me, it also opened the door to healing something I didn't even know was still wounded. Liam recovered completely, and one evening, while we walked out of the hospital together, he held my hand tightly and said, "Mom, you never left me once." And that was enough. Life after the hospital didn't return to normal right away. Liam needed weeks of follow-up appointments, medications, and careful monitoring. But the emotional recovery, the part nobody warns you about, was far more complicated. Mom tried her best to be present. She brought groceries, cooked meals, and drove Liam to school when I was exhausted. She even knitted him a bright blue blanket. For strength, as she called it. But every time she stepped into my home, I felt a quiet heaviness settle in the air, a reminder of the years we pretended certain wounds didn't exist. One rainy afternoon, about 2 weeks after Liam came home, I found her sitting alone on my porch swing. She wasn't crying, just staring at the wet street as if trying to read something written in the raindrops. "Mom?" I asked gently. She flinched, then gave a small smile. "I didn't want to leave without talking to you." I sat beside her, pulling the blanket tighter around my shoulders. She sighed. "I know you're trying to forgive me. But I also know you haven't. Not fully." Her honesty stung because it was true. I want to, I said. But it's hard. You weren't there for me. And when Liam needed us, you disappeared again. She nodded slowly, accepting the words as if she'd rehearsed this moment. When you called, she said softly, I thought I had changed. I thought I had grown past the woman who abandoned her child in a hospital bed. But when fear hit me again, I became her all over. I swallowed hard. Why didn't you tell me sooner? All these years. I thought I was imagining that memory. I was ashamed, she whispered. And I didn't want you to see me as weak. I took a deep breath. Mom, you're not weak. But running away from pain isn't strength either. For a long moment, we simply listened to the rain tapping on the roof. Let me make it right, she said quietly. Not just by helping with Liam. I want to be someone you can rely on. Someone who shows up, even when I'm afraid. I didn't give her an answer right away. Trust isn't something you rebuild in a single conversation. But I took her hand. That was the first step. The real test came a few days later. Liam developed a sudden fever, nothing serious, just a typical post-surgery scare. But the moment I noticed his flushed cheeks and glassy eyes, my chest tightened. Panic flooded in, dragging memories of hospital lights and frantic phone calls with it. My hands trembled as I reached for the thermometer. Before I could even finish taking his temperature, my phone buzzed. It was Mom. How's Liam today? She asked. I had a feeling I should check in. Her voice was steady, almost firm. It calmed me more than I expected. He has a fever, I admitted. I'm scared. I'm coming over, she said. No hesitation. No excuses. Within 15 minutes, she was at my door, hair still damp from rushing out in the rain. She stepped inside, put her hands on my shoulders, and said, We'll handle this. Together. And for the first time since that awful night at the hospital, I believed her. Mom helped me settle Liam on the couch, tucking the blue blanket she knitted around his small body. His cheeks were warm, eyes half closed, breathing a little heavier than usual. The thermometer beeped again. Not dangerous, but high enough to stir every fear inside me. Mom walked into the kitchen and began preparing a cool compress, moving with a calmness I didn't yet have. I watched her hands, steady, practiced, almost as if she were trying to rewrite the past through every careful motion. You don't have to fuss over everything, I murmured, though part of me was relieved. She glanced at me. I want to. And I know you're scared. Those 3 words made my throat tighten. I hadn't told her I still woke up at night, half expecting alarms and doctors rushing in. Trauma clings quietly, showing up in moments no one sees. She returned with the compress and gently placed it on Liam's forehead. He opened his eyes slightly. Grandma? He whispered, his voice hoarse. Yes, sweetheart. I'm here. He smiled faintly and drifted back to sleep. For the next hour, Mom stayed beside him, humming a quiet tune from my childhood, rubbing gentle circles on his back. Her presence filled the house in a way I hadn't felt in years, warm, steady, human. And then, just as I began to breathe normally again, there was a sudden knock at the door. A sharp, urgent knock. My heart jumped. Mom stiffened but didn't move. Through the window, I saw my sister's car parked crookedly in the driveway. My sister, who hadn't visited, hadn't called, hadn't shown the slightest concern while Liam lay in surgery, was now standing on my porch in a soaking wet sweater. I opened the door cautiously. What are you doing here? I asked, unable to hide the edge in my voice. Her mascara was smudged, eyes red as if she had been crying for hours. I need to talk to you, she said breathlessly. It's about Mom. My stomach dropped. What about her? She didn't tell you everything. My sister swallowed hard. There's more. And you deserve to know. Behind me, Mom whispered my name. Her voice was trembling. My sister took a shaky breath and continued. You're not the only one she abandoned. And what happened years ago, it's worse than you remember. Silence crashed between us. Mom's face had gone pale, and for the first time since she confessed to me in the hospital, she looked genuinely afraid. Not of losing me, but of the truth finally catching up to her. My sister stood on the porch shivering, raindrops sliding down her cheeks like cold tears. She looked as if she had been driving for hours with nothing but panic pushing her forward. The wind picked up behind her, scattering leaves across the driveway and making the moment feel even more fragile. "Can I come in?" she asked, hugging herself. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to shut the door and protect the small bubble of peace that had finally settled in my living room. Another part, battered and bruised by abandonment, was desperate to understand what truth she had come to deliver. "Fine," I said softly, stepping aside. She entered, dripping water onto the floor, her eyes immediately falling on Mom, who was now standing beside the couch. Liam slept quietly under the blue blanket, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. My sister wiped her face with her sleeve. Her voice cracked. "There's a reason Mom froze when you called about the surgery. A reason she couldn't pick up the phone for 4 days. Mom's lips parted, but no words came out. She looked smaller somehow, like she had aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. "I already know about my childhood," I said quietly. "She told me." My sister let out a bitter laugh. "No. You know the part she was brave enough to admit. But she left out what happened after." Mom's shoulders tensed. "What are you talking about?" I asked. My sister stepped closer. "Do you remember when you were 9 and I was 12? When Mom said you had to stay with Aunt Marcy for a little while? Do you remember crying because you didn't want to go, because you thought you'd done something wrong?" My breath hitched. The memory floated in, faint and foggy, me clutching a small backpack, sitting in the back seat of my aunt's car, watching my house disappear behind me as my mother waved from the porch. "She sent you away," my sister said. "Not because Aunt Marcy wanted to help, not because she needed a break. Mom was overwhelmed and didn't want to deal with you getting sick all the time. Every time you had a fever or stomach pain or even a bruised knee, she panicked. She told people you were too much." Mom closed her eyes as if the words physically hit her. "That's not the whole story," Mom whispered. "Then tell her," my sister snapped. "Tell her why you really sent her away for those 3 months. 3 months. I stared at her, stunned. The time I remembered felt shorter, smoothed over in my memory like sanded wood with all the jagged edges removed. But 3 months, that was a season. A lifetime for a child. "Mom?" My voice shook. "Is that true?" Mom sank onto the edge of the armchair, wringing her hands. I didn't mean to push you away. I thought I was doing the right thing. By sending me off without explanation?" I asked, unable to keep the sharpness from my tone. "By letting me believe you just didn't want me around?" She looked at me with eyes full of something deeper than regret, fear maybe. Fear of being fully seen. "You got sick so often," Mom said weakly. "The doctors couldn't figure it out. I was terrified every day that something would happen to you while you were alone with me. I was afraid to lose you. So you sent her away," my sister interrupted, voice rising. "Because you thought Aunt Marcy could handle a sick child better? Or because you didn't trust yourself?" Mom flinched. "I was having panic attacks," she finally admitted, trembling. "Real ones. I couldn't breathe, couldn't sleep. When your sister was 12, she called an ambulance for me because she thought I was dying. I was so scared of failing as a mother that I ended up failing you both in other ways." My mind spun. I remembered moments that suddenly made more sense. The way she paced the house late at night, the shaking hands, the silent dinners, the unexplained absences. I remembered waking up in my aunt's guest room, missing home so badly it hurt. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I whispered. "All these years, Mom. All the guilt. All the confusion. Why keep it secret?" Mom looked at me, her face streaked with tears. "Because I didn't want you to see me as broken. I wanted you to believe I was strong. That I was someone you could count on. But you let me feel abandoned instead. I said, my chest tightening. You let me believe it was my fault. My sister lowered her gaze. I didn't come here to attack her, she said quietly. I came because I saw you two trying to rebuild something that was never built right to begin with. You deserve the full truth. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the heater and Liam's steady breathing. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Then, suddenly, Liam stirred. He opened his eyes, blinking slowly. Mom? He murmured weakly. Are you okay? His small, fragile voice cut through every emotion swelling inside me. I knelt beside him, smoothing his hair back. Yes, sweetheart, I whispered. I'm right here. Mom moved closer too, watching him with a mixture of love and dread, as if she feared history was repeating itself right in front of her. Grandma? Liam asked, his voice groggy. Why are you crying? Mom knelt beside him, her voice trembling. Because I'm so proud of you, she said, tears forming again. And because I'm trying to be better. Liam blinked. You're already good, he said simply. Those words, so innocent and undeserved, hit all three of us at once. Mom covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. My sister turned away, wiping her eyes. I held Liam's hand, feeling my heart clench with pain and hope all at once. Maybe the past wasn't something we could erase. But maybe, just maybe, it was something we could finally stop running from. The house felt strangely quiet after Liam drifted back to sleep. Quiet in that heavy way, where silence presses against your ribs and makes every breath feel sharper. My sister stood near the window, arms folded, eyes distant. Mom sat on the armchair again, her hands trembling in her lap. I sank onto the couch beside Liam, feeling the weight of everything we just uncovered pressing down on me. 3 months. 3 months she sent me away. 3 months of childhood I couldn't fully remember, because I had forced myself not to. And now I was raising my own child, terrified of repeating mistakes but finding myself surrounded by the same ghosts. I cleared my throat. Mom, what else haven't you told me? She closed her eyes slowly, her shoulders rising with a strained inhale. I thought telling you about the hospital would be enough. I wasn't ready to dig up everything. My sister scoffed, not cruelly but tiredly. She's been hiding this for decades. You really think it stops there? Mom looked at her sharply. You're not helping. I'm being honest, my sister snapped. Something none of us did back then. Stop, I said quietly, my voice cutting through the tension. Please. No more fighting. They both fell silent. Mom wiped her eyes and folded her hands together, as if she were praying. When your father left, she began, her voice almost too soft to hear, I lost myself. I didn't know how to take care of 2 children alone. I didn't know how to hold a job and pay the bills and still be present for you girls. I swallowed. You could have told us that. I didn't want you to see me as unstable. She whispered. You depended on me. I thought, if I showed weakness, everything would fall apart. My sister rubbed her temples. Mom, we were kids. We weren't judging you. We were just scared. Mom shook her head. I judged myself enough for all of us. The room fell quiet again. Then Mom looked at me, eyes shimmering. The reason I froze when you called about Liam was because I felt like I was reliving everything I failed at. Every fear, every mistake, everything I didn't protect you from. I thought if I rushed to you and something went wrong, it would be my fault again. My throat tightened. You didn't trust yourself? I didn't, she admitted, voice cracking. And when I saw your number on the screen, I knew you needed me. But my body shut down. I panicked. I cried until I couldn't breathe. I didn't come because I didn't feel worthy of being there. My sister glanced at me, surprised, maybe even softened by Mom's confession. Even she hadn't known this part. I looked at my mother for a long moment. Her face was lined with guilt, her hands twisting nervously, her body tense like she expected to be pushed away again. Mom, I said quietly, you could have told me all of this years ago. She nodded, swallowing hard. I know. And it would have hurt. I continued. But it wouldn't have hurt as much as silence. Mom burst into tears again, covering her face with her hands. My sister walked toward her, hesitated, then placed a gentle hand on Mom's shoulder. It was the first soft gesture between them in years. We can't go back, my sister said quietly. But maybe we can finally stop punishing ourselves and each other. Mom looked up at her, eyes wet and vulnerable. I want that. More than anything. I exhaled slowly, feeling something inside me loosen, a knot I hadn't realized was tied so tightly. But just as the room began to settle, as the air softened and healing hovered in the space between us, my phone buzzed on the table. A new message. From an unknown number. I frowned and reached for it. One line stared back at me. You need to know the truth about what happened when you stayed with Marcy. Call me. Attached beneath it was a photo. A photo of me as a child, 9 years old, pale, lying in a bed that definitely wasn't my aunt's guest room. My heart stopped. I suddenly felt cold, dizzy, like the floor had tilted beneath me. My sister saw the look on my face. What is it? I turned the phone around. Mom's face drained of all color when she saw the picture. No, she whispered. Not this. Not now. I looked from the photo to her trembling hands. Mom, I said softly, fear creeping into my voice. What was I in that picture? She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her silence told me everything. Everything. And nothing. And somehow, the truth felt like it was only just beginning to surface. The photo on my phone made my heart stop. Me at 9 years old, lying in a hospital bed I'd barely recognized. The room was sterile, the bed rails high, the walls empty. It wasn't Aunt Marcy's house. It wasn't any place I remembered. My sister stared at it, eyes wide. That's not the guest room. Mom, where was she? Mom's hands trembled, her lips quivering. I didn't want this to come out. She whispered, her voice barely audible. Tell me, I said, my voice shaking despite my attempt to stay calm. She took a deep, shuddering breath. You weren't at Marcy's the whole time. You spent 2 weeks in a pediatric psychiatric ward. You were having panic episodes, refusing to eat, waking up screaming. Doctors said you needed constant observation. I agreed because I was terrified, because I didn't know what else to do to keep you safe. And then I froze. The words hit me like a wave, and I felt the room tilt. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was ashamed. She admitted, tears spilling down her cheeks. I thought if I told you, you'd see me as weak, incapable, and I didn't want you to think I failed you. I wanted you to grow up thinking I was strong, even if I wasn't. But I see now that hiding the truth only hurt you more. My sister, still standing by the window, covered her mouth in shock. Mom, you should have asked for help. You didn't have to do it alone. Mom nodded, her whole body trembling. I know. I was overwhelmed, broken, and scared. I didn't know how to be the mother you needed. I thought I was protecting you, but I failed in ways I couldn't even begin to repair until now. I swallowed, my throat tight with emotion. All my life, I thought something was wrong with me. I thought I pushed people away. I thought I was unlovable. And now I realize, the truth was buried under your fear and silence. Mom's sobs grew louder. I am so sorry. Every day I've regretted it. Every moment I wasn't there for you, I've carried it like a stone in my chest. Liam stirred beside me, his fever finally easing. He blinked sleepily at us. Are we okay? I reached out, brushing his hair back from his forehead. We will be. We're finally being honest, all of us. Mom and my sister both moved closer, taking my hands. For the first time in years, we weren't just 3 people haunted by the past. We were 3 people choosing to face it together, to bear the pain and rebuild what we could. I looked at the photo one last time and deleted it, not to erase the past, but to make room for a future we could finally shape ourselves. A future where fear didn't dominate us, where silence didn't rule, and where love wasn't conditional on perfection. We stayed there for a while, just holding hands. Each of us crying, each of us forgiving in our own way, each of us realizing that the wounds of the past could finally become the foundation for something new. And in that quiet, exhausted, messy moment, I knew one thing for certain: we would not let the past dictate our family anymore. We would heal, together. For the first time in my life, I felt hope, not fragile, not fleeting, but real, like a seed finally planted in soil that could support it. A future built on truth, courage, and love. A future where we could finally begin again, together.